Engines at the machine shop, transmissions on the bench. I guess now is the time to rewire the engine bay. Look, I get it. When it comes to projects like this, nobody wants to deal with the wiring. It can be intimidating. But in my case, I'm dealing with a 45-year-old truck here. As I've done work to this truck, I've come across brittle wires, cracked insulation, poor splices that previous owners have done, failed splices from the factory. I mean, this stuff needs to be addressed. It needs to be done. So, I've got the engine out, I've got the room, I've got the time. I'm going to basically tear it all out. I'm going to reroute it and rebuild it the way that I want it, the way that I think it should have been done, just better than the factory did it. Cleaner, more reliable, and yeah, it's not that difficult if you break it down a little bit. Break it down into sub-harnesses. Don't look at it as one big wiring project. Look at it as, in my case, I've got 5 connections, 5 separate wiring jobs. First one being this one. This one goes pretty much just to the headlights, running lights, turn signals, stuff like that. This one will be super simple. Runs up the side, runs across the front. It'll be easy. The next one over, happens to be this one, which this one just goes, it has the crank signal that goes to the starter relay. It's got the horn, so part of it ties into this front harness. And then it goes to the back of the truck with the tail lights, fuel level sensor, stuff like that. So that'll be relatively easy. It's just a long run along the frame rails. So that one will be relatively easy. The third one is going to be the more difficult one. That's the engine harness. That's got this main splice here that has power to the ignition module, to the voltage regulator, to the coil from the alternator. So this one's going to be a little more difficult. What I'm going to do is I'm going to address a couple of issues that I have at this time. Instead of having a splice right here, this has this has 8 wires going into one splice. I'm going to be using one of these bus bars. I got a couple of these off of a couple of Chevy trucks in the salvage yard, in the pick apart. I'm going to mount a couple of them to the firewall here. One's going to be for that engine harness power, or all the power in the engine harness. It's going to be just more reliable rather than have to deal with 8 wires spliced together in one spot. I'm going to run them to a bus bar. And that way I can, it'd be easier for troubleshooting later down the line if I have to. I can add to it if I need to. So I'm going to use a bus bar for that. I'm going to use a second bus bar for the power feed from the alternator. That is actually right here. And this goes normally to the starter relay. And then it uses, Dodge used, and I'm pretty sure a lot of other older vehicles like this do the same thing. They use the starter relay as the bus bar. So I have the main bus that comes off here, the cab, also coming off the starter relay. So that's 3 wires running down here that were just kind of like laid in here. I can clean that up and make it more reliable, make it cleaner by using another bus bar. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to install a second bus bar here for the main power. That's also going to allow me to address some other issues specific to this Dodge truck. These older Dodges, they use an ammeter. So there's a great write-up I'll include in the description below of how to do an ammeter bypass. I've already done the ammeter bypass, but I'm going to go ahead and redo it just because I don't like the way I initially did it. The write-up has you drill through 2 connectors to run the wires into the cab. And that prevents you from then being able to basically remove these connectors if you need to for any reason. I have a 5th port here on my firewall, my bulkhead connection, that I'm going to use to do the ammeter bypass. So things like that. It's just going to be a lot of rewiring, running all new wires, addressing issues that I've come across, like I said, like this, the splice, the bypass, adding bus couplers, new connectors, and just getting this whole engine bay straightened up. So I guess the first step would be to start kind of tearing some cable out, at the same time running new cable along where I want it to run. That way I make sure I get all the correct lengths and everything that I want, and just basically start with one harness at a time. So you might be wondering, why am I taking the time to unwrap the old wiring harness if I'm just going to be replacing all the wires to begin with? Well, a couple reasons actually. The first is I want to see just how much of the original wiring might still be usable, mainly in cases like this, where there are connectors. I want to see how much of this wire might be salvageable that I can splice into in order to keep a lot of these connectors, just so I don't have to go out and try to find new ones, buy new ones, to replace them if they're still usable, especially for like the headlight connector. You know, I got bulb sockets here, so I'm just trying to see how much of that wiring is still usable. The second reason is for situations like this. If I didn't unwrap the original harness, I wouldn't have found this splice. Now, I'm using a couple of different sources for how everything is connected. One being the Haynes manual, which is great, but trying to follow the wiring diagram in a Haynes manual I've got to sit on the bench over there, can be difficult. I mean, there's small drawings, there's so many wires on there, and all the traces on the drawing are really fine, so they're really hard to follow, especially when you get in situations where there are a lot of wires. The second source that I've been using is a drawing here. Now I found this from classiccarwiring.com. Great resource. You might want to check them out if you're working on an older vehicle like this. I have no affiliation with them. This is just something that I came across and bought, and it's great. I mean, it's a nice blown up drawing of the wiring. It's simplified, but this trace isn't on this drawing. I'm assuming it should be right here where these brown wires cross for the headlight, the directional signal, the left-hand marker. This clearly indicates where there are splices, and this diagram doesn't show this place. I'm assuming it should be right here where those wires cross. It's just not there. So again, that's why I'm taking the time to unravel the original wiring, is for situations mainly for this, but also to see how much of this original wiring might be salvageable to splice into. Again, for connectors like this, for the headlight socket, other connectors for, this is for the, what is this for? This is for the turn signal. This is for the left turn, the fender light. So that's why I'm taking the time to inspect the original harness. But now that I've got this harness, pretty much all torn apart and inspected, and see what I can reuse, it's time to start running the new harness. I've been blocking that camera, haven't I? I do have the right crimpers coming, but this is just for the washer, windshield washer pump. Now that I got the harness roughly laid in, I'll go ahead and connect it, and I'll test all the circuits before I permanently install it. So it's been a few days since I've done any recording, and that's for a few reasons. The first being my camera was starting to die, so that's back at the manufacturer getting fixed. But the two main reasons is that the first, which I will explain more in a minute, is I was waiting on parts. Again, I'll get to that in a second. The second also being that I was taking care of little bits and pieces here and there that needed to be done before I could test that headlight harness that I had finished. So first being the parts. Let me show you what I've got going on and why I was waiting on parts. So here you can see what's been going on a little bit. The white connectors are original to this truck, and the black ones are the ones that I was able to source from a local pick-apart. So the original connectors are what are known as Packard 56. They're made by companies such as Delphi, some other ones out there. Just do a Google search if you're doing one of these trucks, you'll find them. So I had ordered a bunch of terminals, male and female, for Packard 56. Now the female side doesn't really matter. It's the male side where I ran into an issue. So the Packard 56, let me see if I can get a good close-up, is like this. This expanded portion here is what actually locks the terminal into the connector. And normally you would just squeeze this open end or press it with a flat tip screwdriver or something like that. And that's what locks to the connector, and then it allows you to extract the wire from the connector. The connectors that I ended up getting from the pick-apart were off early to mid 80s Dodge D150. So when I got those home and I started to rebuild that first harness I was building, I realized when I depinned that connector, those use Chrysler quick disconnects. They actually lock through this hole in the center here. So that's where the problem was. I couldn't use the Packard 56 terminals in the newer version of the connector. So I had to wait for those to get here. Let me show you a closer look at the original connector, and I'll show you how that terminal locks into the connector. All right, so here's the original connector, and let's just pick a wire here. Let's just say this one. It's easy to get to. You can see it's locked in there. Here's the face. Now, in order to extract these pins, you could press in here with a flat tip screwdriver and to close that lock. I found it's a little bit easier to get in here with a pair of like needle nose pliers. And you just squeeze them and extract the pin. Now with these, actually I have one right here. The connectors that I got off the newer Dodge, since they use the Chrysler quick disconnect, they actually have a lock inside the connector. So these pins will not work. These terminals, I'm sorry, will not work in here. It just doesn't go all the way in. And so that's why I was waiting on parts. The other reason why I wasn't recording is because I wanted to redo the ammeter bypass. Now, previously, the power wires ran through these two connectors, and the wire just ran straight through the bulkhead and connected under the dash. That prevented me from being able to unplug these connectors because there was a wire that went straight through them. So I decided to add these two power buses. This one being for the main power, which has the alternator, which then connects to the starter relay here, and then also goes into the firewall. So instead of using the starter relay that was originally being used as the kind of bus coupler or terminal point, I now have this terminal block. So that runs the wire, that runs the power, I should say, through the firewall and connects into the dash, and then goes to the fuse block and everything like that. So I had to take care of this before I could test the wiring harness that I built for the headlights. So in the process, I also added this second power bus over here, which will be used to replace that failed splice that I found while tearing into the wire harness. The one that goes to like the ignition control module, goes to the ballast resistor. It also goes to the voltage regulator, things like that. Basically anything that is getting power when the engine is running will be going through this bus coupler here. So those are the two main things I was trying to take care of. One, again, waiting for parts, and second was taking care of power issues. So with those two items being done, I was able to test the headlight harness and everything worked fine. So I continued with wrapping the harness in that black loom. Oops. And doing a kind of a little bit of a more final dress in of that headlight harness. And it runs across here to the passenger side, where then it connects down in there. I still have some more cleanup to do, but the bulk of it is done, and everything on that harness works just fine. So with all that being done, now I can continue with the other two harnesses, really. Well, three if you count the harness for the windshield wiper. The harness that goes to the back of the truck, mainly. I mean, it does have a few wires that go forward here, and then the main engine harness itself. And each one of those is going to be done the same way that I did the first one. Just going to take my time, pay attention to detail, and route the wires in a way that, one, is better than how it originally came. Second, it'll just be a cleaner look, more reliable, and just overall a better product. Again, this isn't a project that is really all that difficult. It takes time, it takes patience, and it takes some attention to detail. It's just a matter of don't rush it, don't get in over your head, don't feel like you're getting in over your head, actually. Just break it down into smaller projects and you'll be able to do it. It's not that difficult, honestly. So I'm going to continue with this. I'm still waiting on a couple of other parts I decided to replace while I was in here. But hopefully you guys have learned something. Hopefully you guys have seen that it's not as difficult as intimidating as it appears. So, if you've got an old car or truck that you need to have some electrical work done, try it out. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You may have to redo it. No big deal. It's a matter of learning, and that's what we're all here for, is to learn and enjoy the process and get some satisfaction out of getting stuff done yourself. So, again, thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. Get out in your garage, get out in your workshop, and get something done. See you later.